Life at sea can be rewarding, but the pressures can be challenging too. Seize the Mind trains seafarers to become mental health first aiders, vital for both well-being and safety on board. Mental health first aid helps identify depression, anxiety, and burnout, creating safer, more supportive environments. Our globally recognized courses equip crew with the tools to support themselves and to support each other. Support your crew's mental well-being. Book your training with Seize the Mind today. Seize the Mind, mental health first aid for seafarers. Visit seizethemind.co.uk for more information.
Hi, this is another episode of YPOW's Tales from the Superyacht Laundry. This episode, we are speaking to a lovely lady from Hill Robinson, which is obviously one of the most well-known management companies in the industry. Kayleigh Liddell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we've been actually speaking for a little while now. Obviously talking about all things to do with supporting crew members, especially female crew members. And I just was so impressed with what I was hearing from you about Hill Robinson's approach, what they're trying to do, which I haven't heard anybody else doing. And now, obviously, there are other management companies out there, and I'm sure you're probably
put that
doing
disclaimer out there. Yeah, there are other management companies.
Heard specifically from anybody else doing anything in particular. You're the first individual that I've spoken to, and I just thought it'd be really important to get the management's perspective, because as a crew member, we try to make sure we inform crew about their rights and who's going to support them. Management companies are a big part of supporting a crew's experience through their career. So I thought it'd be really good. And also, we're about amazing stories. So obviously you haven't been on board.
No, don't hold it against me.
But how the hell did you end up in the yachting industry?
Actually quite randomly, I'm going to be honest. So most of my background, I was working with education companies. I was doing things about student welfare and also things about policies and human resources. And I was living in Italy at the time, working for an education company there as human resources and operations. And like I think a lot of companies kind of experienced during COVID, suddenly a lot of things about the company changed, and all of those good things that were kind of keeping you there throughout the really hard times really disappeared. And within like 2 years, I suddenly found that the job was no longer worth what I was sacrificing for it. Now, it's only kind of now that I'm outside of it that I can actually say, yeah, that was seriously affecting my mental health. And it was amazing because at the time I then met the man that I am now with, living in France, and he was looking at it from the outside going, that's not okay. Like,
so you're saying like okay. HR is quite a draining part, you know? I mean, obviously you will get serious situations, or can you just get people that are really whingy and don't like their job but don't know where to go?
Yeah. For me, it was mainly the part which is kind of similar to what I've sometimes experienced with yachting. It's like you're trying to get things to happen and you're trying to do things for the best of everyone. And sometimes that means, you know, being a little bit more rigid. You know, we can all talk about flexibility, being like a family, etc. But sometimes, you know, people want to know the rules and they all want to know that they're being treated equally. You know, they want to know that they're getting the same number of holiday days as somebody else. And sometimes you attempt to put those kind of things in place and the people above will kind of, you know, put blocks in that. they'll be all for it at first, but as soon as like somebody that they've known for years and worked with the company for years comes and complains about or asks for this little bit extra, and then they give it to them, that kind of undermines everything that you're trying to put in place. So for me, I was kind of left in this position of, well, I'm trying to make things better for everyone. I'm trying to put, things in place to support everyone while still adopting a really positive culture. But if you're being undermined at every turn, then you're always going to lose. And it also, it puts you in the position of constantly being like the bad person. You're the person who's, destroying everyone's fun time.
You're talking about culture. Do you think we have gone through an insane amount of change culturally in the workplace? And because obviously things are always changing. The introduction of the internet obviously changed everything from like what a normal job would be, your 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So you've got a whole bunch of people that spend the majority of their working life doing the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Then you have COVID, which kind of kicks everything into orbit kind of thing. Then you're trying to bring back the 9 to 5ers, but they don't have to be 9 to 5. And then introduce a whole bunch of kids now that were like, well, we can do anything. And you're like, well, no, because structure is important, because you kind of need the structure to teach you the job in the first place before you get the flexibility. As far as, from my perspective, that must be really hard to marry the two, like you said, and make a happy family.
Massive changes. I don't think we can ever truly underestimate the amount of change that happened as a result of COVID. So pre-COVID, I'm going to say onshore because I know that it's different elsewhere. We'll get into that onshore, but on land we started to have this kind of change from just talking about human resources, so what generally tends to be the very much the policy writing and sorting out when there's grievances and things, to adopting more talking about people and culture. So we had started to go down this people and culture route rather than just here's what's written on a piece of paper. And then when COVID hit, that people and culture became so incredibly important, and we also had to adapt and find new ways to get people to connect when they're not physically in the same room as each other. We can't do things all sat in the office and go out for lunch and somebody's brought in cake and everything else. We had to try and find other ways to adapt to that. And the younger people who were at that time supposed to be getting their first experience in the workplace, well, suddenly they missed out on that first experience. We all did that time when we were working, in a bar, at a restaurant, even, stupid things like paper rounds and things. We've all had that kind of experience. They all missed out on that. And what they were seeing at home is their parents doing, work from home, hybrid working, being able to take a break and spend a little bit of time at their, with their family, with their children. And we're all talking about mental health. We were all talking mental health, the effects of isolation. So we've got this huge generation who have seen a completely different working pattern, who the first thing that they're kind of learning about is mental health and welfare, not necessarily
doing the job
about the job, about this concept. You put in what you get out, you can get all of these benefits and you get all this support on welfare, but you've also got to really work for it as well. Yeah. So we've got this really entirely different generation. And, for most of us, we don't really start to learn about work-life balance until much later. And we tend to learn about it once we've gone through a period of actually where we've completely tipped the scales in the wrong direction. And then we start to go, oh, actually, I need to think about getting these in place. Whereas there's, a generation now who are going straight into the workplace saying, I know what work-life balance means, and that's what I want.
So in a nutshell, you are, why it got so stressful, because you're the go-between between the board and the workers.
Yeah,
and I imagine the people on the board are all probably one generation. And then, do you know what I mean? I can see problems.
It was wonderful for certain things, like, and it was a non-profit organization as well. And it's always wonderful when you can feel like you're doing something that has such a positive effect on young people. But it also got horrendously affected by COVID, because the work just, we had lots and lots of tutors who were going into schools. We could not do that anymore. So we had to change. I had to step back into doing like actual teaching, because I'm not someone who will ask people to do things I won't do myself. I've had to film a whole bunch of very embarrassing videos teaching children some really basic stuff, but just so that those children had a video that they could watch at home. And we have very different views on how to manage this situation. We had very different views on how to manage the situation when we were coming out of COVID, the number of working hours that people should do, what, our products and things should actually look like, how we should talk to people about it. And, I just found that my job was no longer, what it should have been, what it was supposed to be. And I was ending up with a huge amount of stress for trying to create something that I just think was never actually going to happen. And that's always the worst position to be in, because you're disappointed then as well. Because you can see what it could be, and you just can't make it happen.
Yeah, but it was just too much change too fast. Like any situation, like you did kind of the best that you could. I mean, and rightly, people were absolutely petrified. So you got teachers freaking out as they go to work. The kids will be okay, but they might not live. Death by child.
People's frustrations started to really come out. I was getting like voice messages and stuff from, my bosses and stuff, that it was just not okay. And I know that that's because of their stress and their worry and their fear, but that doesn't mean that I should have to take on that emotion as well.
So that's
where it kind of all changed. I literally, for the first time in my life, I quit a job, which was very strange for me. And I'm not saying that you should like follow a man into stuff, but that is kind of what I did, is that I ended up moving in with my partner who was living in France. And I was like, I'm just quitting. And thankfully he was like, Kayleigh, please just quit. Like, that's fine. We'll get through this. Just quit. It's not worth it anymore. And I bandied around a little bit, trying to think about what my next steps would be and where I wanted to go. And I made a decision that I just wanted to have a job that I didn't have to care about. I said, I want to go work in like a decent company, like a really structured company, a company with a good foundation. And I just want to have a job for a year. I just want to go into an office, do a job, come home, and that's it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not trying anything else. Like, this is the plan. After the 2 years of hell, I think I deserve to just come home and do nothing. And Hill Robinson were looking for a yacht administrator at the time. And I actually grew up in the Isle of Wight. I'm from a naval family. Like, my sister's in the Navy, my dad was in the Navy, my granddad's in the Navy. So there's always been like that culture in my life. And I was like, this just sounds incredibly interesting, so that I'll stay interested in it. But it's an administrative position. It's technically a step down from what I've been doing, but it's a new industry. So that's a good place to start. I want to do this. And I looked at Hill Robinson. I saw what they had done in the previous years. And I was like, this just sounds perfect position to be in. My first day, like, it was still like COVID rules. There was only allowed to be a certain number of people inside the office at the time. But my first day, I remember walking home and getting a text message from my line manager at the time, Isabel, saying, great work today. I'm really glad you're part of the team. And I almost cried. I was like, oh, wow. Is this what good leadership is? Is this what it means to be appreciated? Day one. And she's messaging me, because like, I got the message after I'd left the office, I was a bit like, oh my God, am I in trouble? But no, it was just to say, you know, fantastic, you're doing great. And the first month, she was always sending me messages, just saying, oh, you did great today. You did great this week. I'm really glad you're part of the team. And
was that, did you have like many, as obviously you've moved over from the UK to France. How did you find France? You wanted to move to France? Like,
well, I was living in Italy first, so I haven't lived in the UK for, I think, 7 years, and I'd done a stint for a year out in Italy previous to that. When I lived, like moving out to Italy, I'd always wanted to live abroad, and it was a fantastic experience. And I think anybody who can do it, go do it. It just gives you such a wonderful experience and an outlook on life. I genuinely would recommend it to anyone. When I was living in San Remo, which is just across the border from us here in France. It is so culturally different, though. Like, it's incredible how you can travel for what is effectively less than an hour and have a completely different culture. And I do, like, sorry, Italians. Italians have much better pasta and pizza. The French culture does suit me a little bit more. It's a little bit more similar to kind of UK stuff. Like Italian, it tends to be kind of a little bit more, I would say actually a little bit more laid back. And maybe because I'm just not that laid back a person, I kind of ended up in like enjoying having the stringence of French culture.
So San Remo is, you know, I got stuck on a boat there for a while. It's it is a beautiful little town. I mean, when I went, obviously we're talking years ago, they were just like redeveloping the marina and stuff to make it nicer. And I think as an experience in Europe, it's a nice little, it's got enough, but it's not overwhelming. It's like not going to, you know, if you ended up, you know, in like Imperia or something like that, like that's a lot. But San Remo is like a little bit of a gem, you know. You would only know about it if you were generally going on a boat.
Yes, and the only thing that people tend to know about San Remo is the music festival, but that's really only known kind of within Europe. And I had some really good times there. I really did. I lived in the Old Town. My first apartment is up in the Old Town, which basically means like hiking up this big steep hill to get to your apartment. And I was there walking up this hill in my 20s, like taking a break to breathe. I'm like, what's going on? This is so much.
Feel the burn.
Watching these much older Italian women just walking straight up, no worries, just off they go, up, passing me. I'm like, this woman is probably 90 years old and she's looking at me with such pity in her eyes.
Oh dear.
But it was a wonderful experience. And San Remo is definitely, you know, if your boat stops off in San Remo, it's a great place to go.
Well, the so many path and everything, you know, you've got so much cool stuff to do. But yeah, we're like, anyway, no to every listener. San Remo is definitely a win. It was also really, I felt really safe there. So if I wanted to go off exploring as a single female, like not with other crew members, I found it really safe and just wandering around. Like it was really nice, which you don't get in all of the Italian ports.
No, I mean, when I was living there, it was me and a couple of other girls, and you know, we did know certain areas which were not the safest, I will say that, but they're not the places that you would necessarily go to as a tourist or anything. And we would walk home alone. We always message each other, but it was in general like a safe place to be in as a woman.
So you're kind of nearly a yachty then. You've gone to yachty places. You just haven't actually been on board.
I've gone to yachty places. I spent my childhood at Cows Week down on the Isle of Wight.
Lots of sailors there.
Yes. You know, it's always been kind of adjacent to my life. And I hear a lot of people now like talk about, yachting is so incredibly unique. The experiences are unique. And I think some of them are, yes. But actually, a lot of the stuff that I hear in yachting is stuff that I've heard elsewhere as well. We talk about isolation, we talk about being away from your families. That's not just in yachting that occurs. It occurs elsewhere as well.
Yes, you're a closet yachty, like you nearly was. Like if nearly was. If somebody had offered you, if that serendipitous moment, you would have been that. And it's true. It is true. There are individuals that will always want to take that. Do the gap year in Australia.
Yeah.
That's one of the first tastes. All the Commonwealth visas. There are individuals that just want to experience that, but I still think you're a bit of a closet yachty. You just never got
I do think I think it's sad that I did not know about yachting when I was younger. Even when I was we moved off the Isle of Wight, and then we moved quite centrally up in Reading, but my family originally from Portsmouth. We spent on the Isle of Wight, and yet I had no idea about this yachting industry when I was younger. If somebody had turned around to me when I was 16 and said, well, this is a career that you could have in the future, I might have paid attention to it.
I think
I had no idea. I had no idea it existed.
You've ended up stuck to it anyway.
Yeah, now that I'm in, you can't get rid of me.
You can't. You're stuck. So you're doing admin at Hill Robinson, obviously living your best life.
Yeah. And I was fully prepared for my year of I'm not gonna care. And that lasted a month.
Well done. A nice relaxing month.
My second month in, I got taken to a conference in Nice, the Yacht Crew Retention Conference. And as I was walking down to the conference with my manager, our head of employment, Marianne, she explained to me that part of the reason that I have been hired is because we had a client who wanted kind of human resources on board. I was like, okay, so we were thinking that you could help us, answer this for the client, having HR background. And I'm bringing along to this conference today so you can get an idea of the industry and the difficulties, because, that client's main thing as well was wanting to improve retention on the vessel, being very much I'm tired of seeing different faces every time I come on board my boat. And it was at that conference that I first met Emma from Seize the Mind. I met Georgia from ISWAN. And, not only did I kind of see what was going on within the industry as far as, yacht crew retention was concerned, which I have to say is very similar, very, very similar to what's happening elsewhere. And the answers are, we actually kind of know the answers. And they are the same answers that we see kind of onshore when it comes to things like training, support, culture, benefits, leadership, that's all similar. And then I also got to learn about, welfare and mental health of seafarers, and learn about what was, I'm going to say kind of the dark side of yachting, the side that, was only just kind of being spoken about at the time, but came across incredibly important. You speak to people like Georgia and Emma, they're so passionate about it as well. I couldn't help but get kind of caught up in it.
So Hill Robinson, it came from a client, really. We think about management companies. What obviously we'll talk about the differences now and then, but management companies, it's kind of a level of basic admin and organisation for the boat. It's probably quite surprising to most people that it's only kind of just being kind of come from a HR background, they're trying to, or is it because the industry has always been that notoriously difficult to manage?
I think it's a culmination of different things. So, really, when we think about, let's say, basic human resources as far as yachting is concerned, the only thing that we really have to kind of hold ourselves up to a standard to is the MLC. And I have met and spoken to some people who are on the board for the MLC, the steering group, and I always apologize to them for this, but I always look at the MLC and I'm just like, it's not good. And when I first started trying to create human resource, looking at the MLC and saying it's not good, I definitely made mistakes in those first few months. I definitely didn't really appreciate or understand what this actually meant for people and what this actually realistically means on board, because you're talking about these kind of floating businesses, because that's what they are. They are floating businesses, all with you have an offshore employment company who is issuing your SEA, usually someone like Guernsey, so our employment cell is based in Guernsey. You have a flag state, which is not the same as your employment cell, and is not the same as where the owner comes from, is maybe not the same as where you are actually sailing. So you can very much be a case of where, okay, my employer is based in Guernsey, my flag is the Cayman Islands, and I spend most of the year sailing on a vessel with an American owner, but we're based out in the Med all the time. And me personally, I'm a UK resident. So then how is anyone supposed to really regulate or put into any sort of law how these vessels should run, how we should take care of the people on board those vessels, what the employment law should be? It's so incredibly difficult. There's so many different moving parts. And then on top of that, we're introducing things that, well, actually, this boat's a charter vessel, so genuine is it. This one's private. This guy, it's his boat. He can do what he likes with it. So should we be putting regulations in place for what is effectively his hobby? It's so incredibly complicated, and I really did not appreciate that the first couple of months that I was there. And I'm very, very thankful to Hill Robinson for the people they kind of teamed me up with and the experience that they gave me. I got to work with an amazing yacht manager and yacht management team who were just incredible, kind of explaining to me, actually, these are the realities of this situation and this is how it happens. Our head of employment, Marianne, taught me just an incredible amount about, yacht employment. There's still stuff that I don't know and I don't understand. And, situations will come up and I'll be like, I'll still think to myself, well, hang on, this is simple. It should just be this. And it's like, well, no, it's not just that, because this person, is a UK resident. The boat was in Italy at the time when this happened, and the Italian local legislation is this, but the UK legislation is that. And let's not forget that the employer is in Guernsey. So it's still, to this day, is something that is very, very difficult to manage. So I get a lot of the time when we're going to different conferences and things like that, a lot of people turn around and say, management need to do more. They need to do more.
Is that with the idea that coming top down obviously sounds extremely complicated for a number of reasons? There's so many moving parts. So then to start bottom up, if you understand what I mean. So like you're talking from the crew member, then the crew as a team, and managing kind of up rather than trying to come from on high. Because to get, like you said, all of these new regulations that everybody on land takes for granted, they're not that simple. If you can get them, they're not even that simple to implement. So it's got to come from you can't just pretend that there's nothing there. Would you say that it needs to come from a different angle?
It needs to come from a different angle, because I mean, this is what we've managed to do at Hill Robinson is we've kind of answered a need, and then we've kind of gone, okay, this is how we can put this out elsewhere. Because I mean, it's like I said, when people say management need to do more, they need to understand the complexities of that. Because whilst we at Hill Robinson, we have Crew Employment Services Guernsey, they're a separate entity. So technically me working for Hill Robinson, we're not the employment company. So certain things have to come from Crew Employment Services Guernsey. Now, I'm also not the person on board. That's the captain. Now, you've got to get the captain's buy-in as well. And then obviously, that captain is not the owner of that vessel. He's not the one who's effectively, and I'm saying he because most of our captains are male, but he's not the one fitting the bill for all of this as well. So it's so many different moving parts and so many people to kind of get on board and really get the buy-in to these changes. And I think if we can work more and more with crew, working with the crew, listening to the crew, and knowing that, we always separate the captain from the crew, but actually the captain is part of the crew and they want their crew to have the best possible experience. So the more kind of bottom up that we can get and the more that we can work with those captains and crew, the more that we'll kind of be able to see changes within the industry. So and if we can't do it from this huge legislative part, what we can do is provide a service on board.
So from that first boat, like obviously they're like, can you, how did you feel? Like, what was that? What was that like? You're like,
I was a bit
like, HR. You're like, okay.
I was a bit like, okay, so as from HR, and I was like, looked around, I was like, okay, so what is there? I'm like, well, nothing. Like, HR does not exist. And I'm like, oh, okay. And obviously, like I said, like, HR even, HR is kind of outdated now. Nowadays, we talk about people and culture. We don't just talk about HR. So I'm trying to build what is effectively quite an old idea, but realizing that, I'm working with an industry that is, apologies, but way behind the times in this stuff, way behind the times. But it was quite good for me in some cases, because then when I put up a giraffe welcome pack, everybody's really impressed, and I'm like, this is the basics. Like, I look so good right now for doing very, very little work.
You're like, yeah.
They're like, yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, is it? That's like basics. But that's kind of what I learn, is that getting those basic, foundations in place, even that little start is appreciated. And admittedly, when I first started, I tried to go full on. And
I'm sure that went really well.
It did not go well. Turning around to any captain and trying to say to that captain, right, here you go, here's human resources, here's like all the stuff that you definitely should do now. And it, like, they're like, are you trying to tell me how to run my boat? And what I actually kind of learned, and this is what, a real thing that the yacht manager taught me, was like, you've got to talk to those captains. Like, you've got to talk to them. You've got to listen. And that really is kind of 50% of my job now, is listening. 50% listening, 50% trying to put something into action for it. Because those little experiences that they're kind of getting every single day on board is just, it's invaluable to learn that. And I think this is one of the things that Hill Robinson can really pride itself on, is listening to the needs of the client and listening to the needs of the crew. And that's kind of the direction that we're really trying to push at the moment, is that we want to listen to you. We want to connect with captains and crew and be able to respond to that, because we did this based off the back of a client need. We learned so much from the crew, and then like about a year after trying to do this with this particular client, which was great, and we learned an awful lot, but then basically turned around, Nick Hill kind of turned around to myself and said, okay, now let's do this for everyone.
So so the original goal was just to, make a client happy.
Yeah.
When did it kind of sink in that maybe this is just a good thing to do across the board?
I think it was always there. So I think when we started doing this just for the individual client, everything that we were doing all the stuff that we would put in place, like the new systems and things that we would put in place, every single thing we would do, we had like in the back of our mind, and this is how it could work for everyone. Like we always had this little, like this is how it's happening for this client, but for other people, it could happen this way. So there was always like this thing in the back of our minds of we could do this on a bigger scale. And obviously, when you're working with one individual client, you're not always going to get to do everything you want to do because you are just responding to that individual client need. So we also saw spaces where we were like, okay, we can't necessarily do this client, but this is how we could kind of grow and develop this idea. So I think it was pretty much always there. And then it was, I'm losing track of my timeline now. Like I definitely didn't get my year of relaxing, but it was last year that we then turned around. And like I said, Nick Hill came in very excited about it and just like, let's do it. Let's do it for everyone.
Is there any examples you could kind of say about maybe particular issues that this has helped, like this approach? Now you're kind of rolling it out. What are the main wins, either expected or unexpected, that you could say?
I think there's a couple. So a key thing about what sort of like Hill Robinson is now kind of packaged together as crew services, so Hill Robinson Crew Services, is that we haven't just, said, okay, we're changing our management style. What we've effectively done is we've taken our recruitment section, because we've always had recruitment. We have a training arm called Hill Robinson Academy, and we have our employment. And then underneath that, all of the culture that goes underneath the community part. And by putting all of those points together, we kind of able to support crew and captain throughout their entire journey. Supporting them even before they've got on a vessel, because our recruitment team do a lot of work trying to get out there into schools. We would do a lot of work with UKSA. We do a lot of work with Worcester College as well, and talking to people before they're even on the vessel. And then getting them on the vessel, doing their employment, doing their welfare, doing their training, their development, having this beautiful kind of journey for a crew member. I think that is kind of essential. It's not just a case of where you're intervening at one point. And really for us as well, it's about having stuff in place that kind of prevents it going the wrong way. There will always be troubles and situations, but putting stuff in place so that crew feel supported, crew feel informed, I think that's quite key. And I think one of the biggest kind of answers for it is the amount of support we're able to give captains. So when there is a question over whether it is somebody's employment, whether there's a case of where there's been a grievance on board, which we have had, we are able to fully step in and support. And the captain is always going to be a representative. He's always going to be the person like face to face with those crew members. But being able to pick up the phone and speak to someone who's going to guide you throughout this entire process, if it's a grievance, sexual harassment on board, if unfortunately there's a loss of life, we are there throughout the entire process, and we can help to provide support to those crew members as well. And that's essential. The work that we've managed to do with Emma from Seas of Mind, with ISWAN, to be able to put in place mental health awareness training. We have set up a commissioned helpline now, an emotional support helpline through ISWAN. So all of our crew have access to these resources. And that is so incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously mental health has been a buzzword probably for the last
yes.
year and a half, maybe, when, the whole world has been talking about it since COVID. And obviously with crew members, COVID was, particularly challenging for a lot. Mental health is important. And it is incredible how the industry is more open to having these discussions. What I do think is quite impressive is how Hill Robinson have really adopted it. If you understand what I mean, like,
yeah.
you know, to go get everybody to do the mental health awareness course is one thing, but then to set up a commissioned helpline, I think that's probably, I would say, going over and above what you would expect.
For us, I think it's like you say, mental health is a buzzword. Sorry, and I think that's kind of a problem for me. Like, it should not just be a buzzword that people can rely on. You cannot just turn up at a conference, an event, and say, oh yeah, this is really important. You know, as managers, we have a responsibility to our crew, and we are in the perfect position to connect crew to these resources. Nobody is saying that suddenly every management company has to have like in-house counselors. You know, it's not a case of where all of our recruitment team need to become psychotherapists and things. We're not saying that. What we're saying is the resources are out there. They are out there within the industry. So what we need to do is step up to the responsibility of putting crew in contact with those resources. You know, Emma's been fantastic for us. You know, she has really worked with us. I think we've delivered mental health awareness training to over 500 crew members now. She had the conversation with our academy team. You know, they work together to put this out to our crew. We didn't turn around and say, okay, we're going to write our own mental health awareness course. We went to the expert in it. And then with the helpline, it was, I think it just came off the back of, you know, having a great relationship with ISWAN. You know, they're an amazing team. And at first we had obviously the standard yacht crew helpline on all our posters. And then I think it was Alan who mentioned to me, well, we do a commissioned helpline. And for us, that commissioned helpline is really key, because obviously all crew can access the yacht crew helpline, and they should, but having a specific number for Hill Robinson crew means that we can get reporting on it. Now, no reporting that actually identifies crew members. It's all confidential. When you phone up, you speak to someone at ISWAN. You don't speak to someone at Hill Robinson. But what it means is we can get general reporting that tells us if there are, you know, if there are common themes that are coming up in those phone calls, so that we can step in as management to then, okay, you know, we're seeing a lot of phone calls about bullying, harassment. I sincerely hope not, but if that was the case, then we can step in as management. Okay, what are we going to do to address this specifically? And that is really key and essential to us. And we thought about what we were going to do about crew welfare for a long time. There's lots of people who are passionate about it. And ultimately, what we ended up doing is writing it into our crew employment services agreement. So between us and the client, obviously there is an agreement under our crew employment services, and we contractually put in there that we would provide crew welfare support. And I'm incredibly proud of us as a company for kind of holding ourselves responsible for that. And I remember when we first spoke about the helpline, we had to kind of try and get people on board to a helpline where we were basically saying this helpline will be super successful and we'll be really happy if no one ever calls it. You know, you're kind of trying to say that the objective for us as a fleet is that nobody has to call our helpline.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of putting something in place that you're like, we hope no one ever uses it. But having it there so that people can feel supported. And at the end of the day, we're not just talking about support on an ongoing basis. We're talking about support and intervention during what could be, you know, a loss of life situation. You know, this could be something that saves somebody's life. So even if that phone call only happens once in the next 10 years, it will still be worth it to us because we have stepped in and we've provided that. And that has been, you know, a joy to actually put in place. And we've been able to back up all of this now. We work with various companies. We've worked with Emma from Seas of Mind. We've worked with Zoe, who does meditation. We've worked with TravelQ to create these like onboard welfare packs. So every month we release to our crew just a little pack that talks to them about different areas of wellness and just provide a bit of information, provide the signs, and provide, okay, here's what you can do for health and fitness on board. Here's what you can do for meditation for stress. Here's a little one that's talking about travel welfare, and then also come kind of some of the harsher aspects of sexual harassment. What does that look like? Who can you call if you notice something happening? And that's just a monthly thing that we're doing, and we work with various different partners. Again, it's not a case of where management companies need to feel like we need to do all of this ourselves. We just need to be open to collaborating with the industry experts who are out there.
It is quite amazing. So considering where you've started from, I mean, so, what would you say the role of management is changing to this changing time?
I think it is. I think it's probably quite different for various different management companies. I think we all kind of have our unique selling points. We all kind of set ourselves up in a slightly different way. But I think more and more management companies are spending time on crew matters. We are there operationally. The thing about Robinson is we're a 360 service. So, we do refit, we do project management, we have an aviation side, and we have all of these different areas that we work in. But when it comes down to kind of the pure yacht management side, more and more it's a case of where we're dealing with crew situations, whether that is putting stuff in place as terms of crew retention, whether that's looking at crew salaries, whether that is crew grievances, whether that is recruitment. A lot more the focus tends to be now on that crew side. And I do know people from other management companies, and we discuss it quite a lot, that there's now so much more expectation for us to respond to the crew issues, which are not always the things that people actually been trained to do. And it's the same conversation that I have with captains. I have a lot of captains turn around to me and say, Kayleigh, 90% of my job now is the one thing that I've not been trained to do. I've been trained to navigate the boat. I've been trained in all of these areas, but now I am having to take care of people's mental health. I'm having to think about the culture on board. I'm having to think of people's personal and professional development.
I'm sure they're loving every minute of it.
Katie, what is CPD? This is the stuff that's coming up more and more. And I think with that, I think captains are starting to see and adapt to that change. We see more and more of them come into, these kinds of trainings and things for mental health. And as a management company as well, we are changing, we are adapting. We're trying to make sure that within our offices and on board our vessels as well, that everybody's got the knowledge that they need.
So obviously, to kind of finish off, because it's been really interesting, it's a bit of a journey, and I think it's not just, I hate to go back to COVID, but it created a massive point of reflection. It created a pause, basically. Sometimes you're so caught up in the job, to change it is really hard work because you're so busy in the job. But what COVID did, it created a massive pause point, and then going back was never going to be the same because everybody's just had time to reflect on what the job is, what the industry is, and also the opportunity to maybe we could change.
Yes.
Because once you do see the glaringly obvious, terrible things that, well, not even terrible, just annoying, why do these things still keep happening? Is it possible to fix? If it is, let's, get on with it. So, from Hill Robinson's perspective, what have you got in the pipeline for the next, year? Obviously, we've got Monaco coming up.
For the next year, for the next 10 years, I mean, I think we've got quite a lot that's going to be coming up. That's, we've already achieved so much, and we're continuing to really promote our crew services and talk about this entire journey with recruitment, training, employment. We actually just had our Antibes office completely revamped, so we are relaunching our office space right between Cannes and Monaco because that is our new crew services space as well. So all new space for crew to come in and grab a coffee and also speak to our team, get advice when they need it. We're going to have a few different events and training happening around there. We're obviously headed straight into Monaco Yacht Show now, and we are sponsoring the Captains and Crew Lounge this year. So again, it's all about continuing that focus and that connection with crew. We're going to be running a few things from our Panorama office as well. So some Meet the Experts, and we're going to have a wellness pop-up there as well. So people will be able to come along, do some yoga to start off with, and meet some of our partners that we work with to learn about different aspects of welfare, pick up some products and things as well for themselves. And obviously we're working with you guys as well for the packs that we're going to send out.
Yeah, so we are working together. Like I said, it just seemed quite a natural thing to kind of get you guys involved. So for any of the listeners that are going to be at the Monaco Yacht Show, we will be handing out our special... Well, I don't want to say, well, it is a wellness pack, but basically there's going to be a bag, and on the side of the bag it says crew knowledge is power. And basically everything in the bag is knowledge and potentially power. So we're going to be handing those out. And that ranges from all sorts of things. So actual physical safety to financial safety to mental health. We've got a little bit of everything going in. Nutrition. I'm quite excited about this, Monaco, I have to say. It's going to be
great bag. I'm excited about this year's Monaco. Just like there's going to be a lot there for crew, a lot of things that we can talk about. And it's nice to also see us doing something that's very physical and actionable. It's not just about the talk, but it's, putting together these bags. It was such a great idea from yourselves, and I really hope it'll go a long way to protecting crew and also just supporting them in general as well.
Well, like you said, collaboration, from a management company's perspective, you don't need to have the answers. You don't need to have the degree in psychology or, nutrition or any of those things. You just need trusted individuals to point your crew to and take that seriously. And I think it's all a step in the right direction for crew.
I mean, it's the welfare stuff, use that knowledge and really connect with people. And when it comes to human resources stuff, yes, you need to, like you say, knowledge is power. You need to have that knowledge. Luckily for myself and Hill Robinson, we have that knowledge there to be able to build that kind of thing, to make those improvements to our employment, to our management. So you do need to have that kind of knowledge in there, but that knowledge is also out there as well. It's there. Just go speak to some people, get that collaboration going, and then we can all do things that will improve the industry for everyone.
From a female perspective, just ask older women. We know. If you're a young lady and you're at the Monaco Yacht Show and there's some old birds like me wandering around, we know. We've been there. We've done that. We can point you in the right direction.
I think from a female perspective, for me, it's been slightly difficult sometimes, it's about something that the industry has not really seen before to a lot of males. And I am a tiny blonde woman trying to spout change in the industry, and knowledge having never been on board. It is a fight and it is a battle, and I think a lot of the time, women within the industry, we tend to end up in the areas that are kind of like about care which is not just something that happens to see, it's seen elsewhere. And sometimes that is kind of seen as lesser, or it's fluffy. You keep your woman stuff over there, please. But what I would say, it's worth the fight. Like if you're sat on board a vessel right now and you want something in place, if you are sat in a management company thinking, Kayleigh, you're saying all the right things here, because I am saying all the right things, and you want to see your management change, it is worth the fight, because every now and again you are going to get someone who is backing you up. And, you know,
there
like
is more.
I was extremely
multiplying.
fortunate to be backed up on what we were trying to achieve. And for Hill Robinson to really buy into it. And it can be exhausting. And I know as a woman going on board and talking about things like sexual harassment, talking about, you know, having even just basic policies in place about, you know, maternity leave. Like, even though maternity leave doesn't exist, and we're saying, can someone please write that down so that women know when they come on board that it doesn't exist? Just make it clear that it doesn't exist, so you can make an informed decision. That's all we're talking about. It's hard as a woman to kind of push to make these changes. And I say that as, you know, I am very aware of the fact that Hill Robinson is unique, because pretty much every single one of our yacht managers in our Antibes office are women, which is kind of different. And maybe that is what has helped us push forward these changes. And the fact that all three of our leaders within cruise services are all women as well. And that is fantastic to see, that our head of employment, our head of recruitment, our head of academy are all incredible women who are striving forward this new program of services. I think is amazing. It wasn't always easy. And I said, if you are a woman and you are trying to make this kind of change happen in what is still a male dominated industry, let's be very clear about this. All I would say is that I know it's exhausting. I know it is exhausting. You know, you get so tired. But we're growing in number.
We're growing in number, to be honest. Like anyway. there are more of us now, and also more connected than we've ever been. Like you've mentioned a few individuals. There's a lot of ladies that I'm connected to, and you're connected to, and we're all saying the same thing from the shoreline.
We are all there. We're all on the shore. Please connect with us.
Yeah.
And you know what? Bring along an ally. Bring that ally along, because they are there. They do exist. You know, I have male colleagues who are like pro everything that we are doing. You know, they stop, they listen, they want to know. They do exist. I know on the days where you're kind of saying something and everybody's like turning, well, a lot of men turn around to you and saying, do we have to talk about the fluffy stuff?
The fluffy stuff.
The fluffy stuff.
The fluffy stuff.
Just know that this community is actually out there. It is there.
Well, that's enough fluffy stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, enough fluffy stuff for today, okay?
We'll bring our fluffy stuff podcast to an end.
Yeah.
No, like I said, you know, the reason why I thought it was important to do this episode is because I've not come across it yet. Now, like I said at the beginning, this doesn't mean that other management companies aren't doing some amazing things. I just haven't heard it. So I'm sure hopefully they'll all come out of the woodwork to talk about what they're up to.
So. I hope so. I like, as much as we are a very protective industry, we all, you know, it's competitive, so we want to keep to ourselves. Let's talk about what we're doing.
Yeah,
like,
no, 100%.
It's the only way that there's going to be change.
It's better for collaboration. It is better for a collaboration. Well, thank you very much for being a part of this episode. I really appreciate it. And yes, well, I'm very much looking forward to Monaco. I will obviously see you there, and we'll be obviously putting out information for the crew activities that you've got going on and how crew can get involved. By this Saturday, they'll probably have partial liver failure and be wanting some kind of TLC at some point.
Bit of a break,
but that was just what it was like when I did Monaco in my day. So, you know, they might be wanting someone to lay, you know, or just somewhere to lay on the floor and stop moving. That's basically my yoga.
Pop-up, that's fine. I can lay on the floor. That's fine. We do have a skincare bar as well, so you can get like a bit of a facial and just a relaxing time as well.
Look how things have changed. So thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
To our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Obviously, there are a lot of other episodes if you've enjoyed this one. If you're interested in any of the information that we've talked about in this episode, we will provide links below. And obviously, we've got connections to all relevant individuals if there are any questions. Going further than that, if you want to be part of the Yacht Pearls of Wisdom community, where we can literally tap you into all of the experts we're associated with, please join us on that. But until that next time, thank you very much for being part of our podcast.
Thank you.